I would like to. I was bound.
So I don't have it. What do you think?
Okay. Let me see if I can find it on here, and then I'll I can run upstairs and get you one.
Do you mind? Okay, that would be probably the best.
W9, right?
Yeah. We couldn't print it out just together, huh? Yep, that's it. Yeah.
I'll do that.
Awesome. Thanks. Okay, thanks.
What's going on in your life?
You've accepted now. You accept Jesus. I understand. I'm not sure I'm on beds. Think about all the prophets. Or even worse, thinking about like are you prepared to live with that? So exactly. And I trust you. You're talking survival. I steal that.
Okay, you guys. Let's wrap up our conversation.
Handle.
How's that going? Anybody want to share about their experience? I saw some. Okay, somebody had a great counselor up here. Tell me why. What was the characteristics
The characteristic of my counselor?
of your counselor?
He was heartfelt.
Ah.
Opened eye-to-eye contact, let me know no matter what, that the love of Christ and his testimony was stronger than anything that was dark and deep inside of me.
Did you guys hear that? Right? So the love of what was stronger and deeper?
The Lord.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And his authenticity when he was, giving me that was powerful.
Beautiful. So the authenticity of directing somebody to the Savior in the midst of that was powerful, right? So we're relying not on our strength necessarily, but the strength that's been given to us through the power of the Holy Spirit. Beautiful. What else? What else? What was it like for the counselor?
For me, it was emotional.
It was emotional.
Yeah. And I didn't think that I would react with a certain look on my face. So
Yeah.
then I had to regroup myself and come from a different, remember, they need me. So if they see that look on my face, then, I'll freak them out.
Yeah. Well, and it's so interesting because we think about that, right? Like, if I start crying, they're going to freak.
Yeah.
But it depends. If the tears are judgmental, if they're genuine, like, oh, I love you, I care about you, I want to help, that is clearly communicated, isn't it? So there's a difference between sympathy and empathy, right?
And that's what happened with me is I was saying, okay, well, is that what you really want, or would you much prefer, having somebody help you? And what if I'm there, with each step, trying to, making sure that you're okay? And I started crying.
Mm-hmm.
And so.
And what was that like to see her tears?
I think from the counselee's perspective, to see her tears, and she has a very warm and welcoming, soothing voice.
So there, she saw tears. It felt warmth.
So
Had
what
a
she was
soothing
thinking,
voice.
her tears probably communicating weakness. From my perspective, her tears communicated care, sympathy, and that as a person who was, in a suicidal place, it probably would make me rethink the magnitude of my decision. In my mind, it's probably no big deal, no one's gonna care.
Mm-hmm.
But then when she's crying and she's showing sympathy and she's offering help and walking me through it and not just pushing me off to somebody else, it communicated that, my life probably does matter.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah. So she was offering hope by being there, being a real person. I worked with a little kid last week who was suicidal. Such a cutie, little 7-year-old. He's like, sometimes I want this game of life just to be over. So cute. His grandpa committed suicide. His family has no faith foundation. For some, you see that. It's a family pattern. I worked with a gal whose brother committed suicide, mom committed suicide. And yeah, for some, unfortunately, it just, the ripple effect still can be there, but it's an option in their brain. And so this little kid, in that moment, I was like, man, you were so cool. Do you have any idea how cool I think that you are? He has all this knowledge of tanks and trains and, and I'm like, tell me more. Like, I'm fascinated by you. Tell me about why things are so hard. My parents are getting a divorce and they're, essentially saying I need to choose, who to live with. And this isn't fun. This isn't a fun part of this game. I just want it to be over, And so in that, of course, like, he's getting support by, I'm on a team of, of specialists that help him. So this problem is clearly addressed by a team of clinicians, but essentially, in that moment, like, the reaction of like, what? You're awesome for a kid kind of built him up a little bit, right? But, in that moment, of course, like, tearfulness, he probably would have been encouraged by that too. So we've got to be real people. That's what you thought? Feels very genuine. So when we're genuine, that's powerful, right? Yeah, good. Anything else? Yeah.
I was gonna say, sometimes if you're getting emotional and they're not, they should be feeling emotional, but they're cut off from their own emotions. So when you get mirrored back of, that's how I should be feeling. I should be upset that I want to commit suicide. And it's not just words you're saying, like, you're actually the deepest form of empathy. It's like feeling what they should be feeling.
Yeah, that's really true. That's a good point, that a lot of people that are suicidal are actually numb. They've come to a point where the pain is so intense, they're sort of disconnected. Soul, spirit, mind, body is, and all these different fragmented parts. And, as, what's your name? As Tia mentioned, that, when we sort of mirror, empathy, it's like, they could then see, like, wow, this is a sad situation that I'm in. I see tears. Okay, that may be a trigger for them to get in touch with the reality and the weight of the situation. Good point. Anything else?
Could you see the previous slide?
Sure. See if I could find it here. Nope. That one? Is that the one that you want? Okay. All right, you guys, so we are transitioning. Take a deep breath. Right? Shake it off. Now we're going to talk about being mandated reporters. You guys can do this. I believe in you. And I know Brenda is very selective about who she chooses for this, so I know she does too. Okay, wait, this is not the right one. So we're going to talk about being a mandated reporter, and then at the end, we're going to walk through the road, the Romans road, to talk about sharing our faith. So we'll end kind of on an upbeat note. Woohoo, right? Okay, so confidentiality builds trust, builds relationship. Relationship is key to facilitating change. And the goal is a deeper, safer emotional bond between two human beings, allowing them to see Christ in you, hope, and that someone cares. So, of course, you know, the space that you and your counselee shares is a very sacred ground. You know, in that space, you're going to offer gems that the Lord has revealed to you in your own personal quiet time. You're maybe even going to offer like your personal victories in light of things that may be helpful for that person that you're meeting with. But ultimately, this relationship where they know that they could count on you, that you will break confidentiality when you need to because you care that much to get the help that may really get them through a really tough situation. But as you communicate in that first meeting, that time is going to be confidential, but you are a mandated reporter. That's what I always tell all my clients first. You know, it's kind of awkward at first, like, well, what are they going to say? Are they going to then withhold information? But, you know, boundaries for us as human beings make us feel safe. You know, you see kids on a playground and, you know, when there's, you know, sort of a boundary around them, they stay within it usually. You know, there's security in that. You know, when we communicate our boundaries as counselors, clearly we communicate that we care enough, you know, to set a boundary and to stick to that, right? Okay, so again, confidentiality builds trust. It helps strengthen relationship. And our relationship is really the healing elements that can really help people through really tough times. So we are mandated reporters, and when to break confidentiality. We report what? We report what? We report what? Tarasoff. I'll get into all of these after we note them. And we do not report domestic violence unless it's a child, elder, or dependent adult. We do not report rape unless it's a child, elder, or dependent adult. And we report suicidal ideation. So we report child abuse, okay, in the form of physical, sexual, emotional, mental. And there's a lot of information. If you just want to Google it, it's kind of curious what the parameters are on that. Sometimes we may go, oh, this sounds abusive to me. Let me do a little research and, you know, sort of see what, you know, different like notable centers say about what clarifies as child abuse. Of course, if you see, you know, if they say that their, you know, individual is unfortunately taking their anger out on their children and, you know, leaving bruises and things like that, then, you know, obviously that is, you know, a reportable, you know, situation. And anything sexual with child, we'll get into more of the specifics of the parameters a little bit further into our slideshow. But we report Tarasoff. Tarasoff is if somebody has communicated directly that they're going to kill somebody. I'm going to kill, you know, that person that I see at the bus stop who has made, you know, sexually inappropriate comments towards me. And I have a gun, and I'm going to go there tomorrow and shoot him, you know, because he reminds me of my abuser when I was a kid or what have you. Okay, so what we need to do then is inform the police. Okay. All right. So carrying right along. So a person, mandated reporter defined, a person required to notify authorities concerning suspected child, dependent, or elder abuse. Do you guys know what a dependent adult is?
Disabled or physically unable to care for the child.
Yep, exactly. So somebody who's disabled, physically unable to care for themselves. Okay, an abuse defined. A personal injury that is inflicted by another by other than accidental means on a child by another person. It also includes sexual abuse, neglect, no food, issues with clothing, shelter, medical treatment, willful cruelty or unjustifiable punishment, unlawful corporate punishment or injury, and abuse or neglect in, out of home care. So it could also mean emotional trauma. Sometimes I hear about domestic violence happening in front of children, and that's a reportable situation. Because, of course, what can happen to that kid if they see their dad beating their mom to a point of death? It's traumatizing for that little one, right?
Yep.
So that's tricky. Again, it's hard. When we know that there's domestic violence going on in the home, can't necessarily do much in terms of that. But if there's a child that's witnessing that, we could call Child Protective Services and make sure that that kid is going to be safe. Okay? So what is not child abuse? Somebody want to read that first point? Children fighting. Injuries caused by children fighting by mutual consent. Kids will be kids. We say that often, right? But sometimes the play gets inappropriate and it's malicious, and we've got to be aware of that as well. Reasonable force. Injuries caused by reasonable and necessary force used by a peace officer acting within the scope of his or her employment. Injuries caused by reasonable and necessary force used by public school personnel to quell a disturbance that is threatening physical harm to someone or damage to property for purposes of self-defense or to obtain possession of weapons or other dangerous objects within the control of a child. I used to work at a psych hospital, and we were trained in, it's called PROACT. Has anybody heard of that? So it's this way of physically restraining somebody who is violent. And we had some patients that were physically restrained and would have like rug burns because we'd have to take them down. Can't believe I ever did this job. It's good training, good experience, but
Have you done it personally yourself?
Takedowns. I was there. I was usually like the manager of it, but I was trained to do it, of course. So, and some people would come, so we would be trained and actually do that within the training, but I would be the one that would say, go ahead, guys, you could do it. But anyhow, so in light of that, of course, there was sometimes harm that was, impacted, that had, been inflicted upon the person that was trying to cause harm to another patient, and that was sometimes questionable, of course. But again, when we're in the situation, or we've heard of a situation where somebody does something to kind of get in the way and block as a protector from harm, then that is not, of course, child abuse. Corporal punishment is not reportable unless it leaves a mark or is inhumane. Consensual sexual activity. This is interesting. Let me move on here. Okay, so consensual sexual activity involving minors. This is something that you have to keep in your brain. It's confusing. So generally, this is not reportable. However, there are some exceptions. So if there's a teenager who's under 16 and engaging with somebody that's 5 years older, 21 or older, let's see here. Yeah, that is something that is in fact, let's see. So this is not child abuse. Again, so under 16 and over 21, it's so confusing, these numbers. We'll get into more of the specifics of when we do report. And lewd or lascivious conduct where the minor is 14 or 15 and the adult is 10 years older. So these are the exceptions. These are the exceptions. Thank you. Yeah, these are reportable. So under 16 and over 21. Thank you, guys. I just got test taking anxiety in this. This is all on our licensing exam, which happened a few years back. So anyhow, lewd or lascivious conduct where the minor is 14 or 15 years old and the adult is 18 years older than the minor. And any consensual sexual contact between minors where one is over 14 years of age and one is under 14 years of age. So just kind of keep this close. It's confusing, right?
Under 16, over 21, and then
Yeah.
over 14 and under 14, that doesn't
I
matter.
think you said 18 is not supposed to be 10.
So yeah,
Adult
it's,
10 years.
So it's like a minor who's over 14
yeah,
having sex with a minor that's like 12 or something.
right,
That's
So there's that little
reportable
window.
Because they're not.
This makes sense.
right. Got it? and now sort of shifting on. So again, if you're working, I don't know if any of you guys will be working with teens, but if so, be aware, of course, working in a church setting, we should be talking about, specifically, purity and the acts of that in light of, maintaining good relationship in terms of others and with our relationship with God and, with friends, again, practicing healthy boundaries in light of that, should be an important topic that comes up in talking with teens. But keep that close by, if you are, to just note it, because it's confusing. It's hard to keep track of the numbers. So who to report to and when. Child Protective Services, or CPS written report within 36 hours. Or if you know that somebody is actually in the midst of abuse, you want to call 911. If you hear that there's an imminent danger currently, you want to do that. So let's see here. I have phone number for you.
Elder dependent age, right? Or you already got dependent adult?
We're going to go to that next one. Yep. Okay, so here in San Diego, the phone number for Child Protective Services is 858. You guys want to write this down? 560-2191. And they have hours of operation between 8 and 5, Monday through Friday. And if you're out of San Diego County, the phone number is 800-344-6000.
What do you say the office hours? 8 a.m. to 5 p.m.?
Yep. 8 to 5, Monday through Friday.
That's San Diego time, right?
Yep.
No, the 800 number is for if you're outside of San Diego.
Yeah, and the 800 number is for all of California.
Oh, it's California.
Yep, it's California.
That's California. All right.
Sorry, could you keep the 1-800 number again? I
Sure.
lost it.
Yep. So the 800 number is 800-344-6000.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Do you guys have any questions? Okay. Okay, so moving on to elder and dependent adult. Physical abuse, neglect, financial abuse, abandonment, isolation, abduction, or other treatment with resulting physical harm or pain or mental suffering, or the deprivation of care, custodian of goods or services that are necessary to avoid physical harm or mental suffering. So if you guys hear of, maybe some adult children taking care of their senior parents, and you know that they have taken money and, are sort of floundering, just doing things that are inappropriate, we have to call protective services on that. Yes?
What if you have like a friend who volunteers at like a nursing home?
Yeah.
And then she tells you of like all the stuff that goes on in like a nursing home, like all the neglect and
Yeah, that's interesting. So being care counselors, we know that we're mandated reporters here. We have our hats on when we're engaging in, care counseling. And we may be walking down the street and we hear our neighbor, being really harsh with his or her children. A gentleman here said that, a friend of his had mentioned that there are a lot of suspicious things that are going on at like a skilled nursing facility. What do we do? You're not mandated to report when you have your counseling hat off, but you can, as a good citizen, take some steps in providing, the authorities with some important information. Okay? Any questions about that? No. Okay, and so on to Tarasoff. Okay, so I described Tarasoff again. It's essentially, when we have found out that there's somebody that is threatening physical violence against a reasonable identified victim or victims, that is when we have the duty to warn. Okay, so if somebody mentions a threat, ask who this person is. Do they know their name? Do they know their whereabouts? And same thing with children and adults. Like, try to get as much information as you can, and sort of letting those people know that, give you that information. that you're here to support and make sure that, you know, those people get the help that they need. Okay, and, you know, essentially saying that you're an ally there can be helpful with some people. With other people, if you have to report things and it has to do with them, they may be very resistant to giving any information. So you know, whatever information you could get from them, you know, that's really helpful for the particular agencies that you're working with. Okay, so if there's a duty to warn under the limited circumstances specified above, the duty shall be discharged by the lay counselor making reasonable efforts to communicate the threat to the victim or victims and to a law enforcement agency and care counseling department. So that's another point is, you know, of course, informing the officials. And if you can, in fact, inform the person, if that individual has the phone number and the name of the person, making a phone call to that person and saying, hey, you know, watch out. So-and-so is going to be at the bus stop. You may not want to go there tomorrow. Okay, and of course letting us know, the counseling department here at church. Okay. So if you made a mistake, no liability. If you did not report, so no, again, if you didn't report, of course you're liable. And if you do report something, nothing happens, at least you're safe and, you know, you've communicated what, you know, maybe a reason. You don't have to do the investigation yourself. That's something that kind of takes, you know, the pressure off. Just knowing, okay, you have reason to suspect this. And so just taking some steps in terms of getting the support that people may need is important. But don't be the investigator in light of it, okay? You don't have to call and find out more information from the specific person. Just call the agency, okay? All right, and so let's see here. Let me go back. All right. So counselee is in such mental or emotional condition so as to be dangerous to him or herself or others. Okay, only when such disclosure is necessary to prevent the threat and danger. So again, this is, you know, the things that I've already touched on. Feel free to review that. So when to get help or refer. Appearance of threat to personal safety. What is going on here? It looks like I have the that's start of, that's right. Yep, that's it. Okay, thank you. Okay, so on to suicide. Shake it off. How are you guys doing? It's a lot, right? Okay. So moving right along into suicide. So again, counselee is in such mental or emotional condition so as to be dangerous to him or herself or another's property. We, you know, talked about this before. So only when such a disclosure is necessary to prevent the threatened danger. So know that, you know, when somebody is sharing about those thoughts and saying they're going to do something about it, we got to do something. Do a welfare check. Okay, so for example, this section would only apply in situations where a counselee has threatened suicide and the lay counselor determines that informing someone is necessary to keep them from harm. Call 911 and let us know.
Going back to Tarasoff,
Yeah.
Is there a requirement to let the counselee know that we will be notifying the law enforcement?
No.
Potential victim? Okay, so.
You don't need to let them know.
The Child Protective Services.
You don't need to let them know either. What I've done in the past, depending on the temperament of the person, is, you know, essentially inform those that I think, you know, it would benefit our therapeutic relationship. You know, and others you could tell are just contentious and really angry, and you think that it would not be beneficial to inform them. So, you know, so for some, you know, I like to kind of clarify that I am going to be their voice in it, and others just that are angry or unrepentant, you know, essentially like would not benefit from being informed. And we do not need to inform, you know, either things, either parties. Any other questions about that?
Yeah, you said if you don't report, you're liable. Who are you liable to, and what are you liable for?
Yeah, so in the case that somebody was killed, okay, and it came up that somebody actually informed the care counselor that they were going to do that, Okay, so you're sitting with your counselee and they said that they're going to kill so-and-so this date, this time, and you haven't informed, the police, you haven't tried to inform the person, you haven't informed our counseling department, and it came up in court, so you could be, liable. It's against the law. Make sense? Okay.
You'd be charged with an accomplice or
I don't know what you'd be charged with, but yeah. Yeah, it's not something that we want to mess around with, obviously.
like they're an accomplice to even though you didn't do it.
Okay, so carrying on to when to get help or refer. So again, when we see that, when somebody's suicidal, that the appearance of threat to personal safety is clear, that there's a plan, for a completion of a suicide. That the person might have a means and strong intent. We need to refer and get support in light of that. So you feel the amount of time you can dedicate to the situation is inadequate. Noting that, within counseling, we usually have about 3 to 5 sessions that we offer. And if you, again, as I mentioned before, have seen that the depression is severe and isn't lifting, want to make sure that you hand them off to Brenda and provide, counseling referrals as well. So again, and then the next point I think is important when, we need to refer is if you don't see any progress in your meetings. And then the next point, the issues are more than just spiritual. You have somebody that has a significant chronic mental health diagnosis. If you're meeting with somebody that has schizophrenia or bipolar disorder or also obsessive compulsive disorder in terms of thoughts, it's important to, get the person the help, professional help that may be needed, that you may feel is out of your scope, so to speak. And this is important too. If the person is in denial, that's important to refer. If there's just sort of a wall that you continue to hit where they aren't saying that they'll follow through with anything, they continue to persist with these suicidal thoughts, we want to get help in light of that. So refusal to learn from experiences, again, that kind of goes along with denial piece. And if you know that the person has history of drug or alcohol use, oftentimes when we're meeting with people that are intoxicated or under the influence, we're talking to the drug and not the person. So counseling doesn't usually help until, it could help in terms of getting treatment, as we ask and are identifying underlying motivations for help. But if somebody is suicidal and actively using drugs and alcohol, they aren't in a place of reality. So that is a tough place, and it's important to identify the referrals in light of that.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Well, what happens like when you're trying to counsel someone and they're on drugs and alcohol? Then do you have to end the session or call somebody?
Yeah, if you know that somebody's under the influence, in a loving, sort of supportive place, let them know, like, hey, I don't know if this is the best time for us to meet. I think it would be beneficial for you to, maybe get some support with this. It looks like this is really a problem. Yeah, so maybe in light of that, if you know that you're working with somebody and they're under the influence, like, provide them with those referrals right then and there, and kind of follow up with them and see if they will get the help. You may want to, of course, like, meet with them again and say, hey, so are you ready to get help yet? Your focus of counseling may be just that. Hey, there's more for you in this life than depending on drugs and alcohol to get you through it. Like, let's talk about how, Christ can in fact be that solution for you, to the pain that you're suffering. Okay, so they refuse, again, we described that, they refuse to apply the counsel that you have been giving them. So again, going back to denial, and you believe they want quick fix solutions. So that's interesting. When you have a person that's in front of you that says, okay, 3 sessions, what are you gonna do? How are you gonna help? How are you gonna fix? And that just feels really overwhelming to you. It's like, well, maybe you need somebody that's gonna be, essentially more of a directive, professional. So You know, I have to tell you that Grace and Brenda do such an excellent job of pairing y'all with people that, you know, they would think would be an appropriate fit. That's why they take the time to invest in you, to train over these weeks, and interview you pretty intentionally, so that then when the pairing takes place, you know, they'll just kind of have that spirit-led, you know, discernment to place you appropriately. Okay, any questions on that? Yes?
When it says like the issues are more spiritual in nature, it's if they've already gotten a professional diagnosis on like OCD or bipolar. Because sometimes, you know, like people that aren't professionals, they think, oh, that person's OCD, and it's like they're not really OCD. It's like, you know, that's what it's saying.
So your question is,
That
referral is needed when?
is when there is a professional diagnosis of that.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends. You know, if the person, you know, is coming to you for help with their obsessive compulsive thought disorder, or they're coming to you for, you know, treatment for schizophrenia, it's like, well, wait a minute. I'm here to support you spiritually. You know, and some people that have those diagnoses are very functional people and do, in fact, need support spiritually. But you may have a sense like, they keep asking me about cognitive behavioral therapy, and I don't know what that is, right? They keep asking me about dialectical, all these like therapeutic, you know, maybe frameworks that they had heard of before. And you're like, that's out of my training, guy. What are you talking about? You know, so in light of that, to just know, well, if it feels like they're needing more from you than spiritual support, then provide a referral. Does that help? Okay. Yeah, and you know, it is, again, interesting to see very, you know, just because somebody has a diagnosis does not mean that you immediately refer them out. Okay, you have to find out why, in fact, they're coming to you for counseling. Depends on their motivation and what they're bringing to you. Okay? Any other questions?
Yeah, if you don't report it, what are you supposed to do with a rape victim?
With a rape victim, empower her or him in the ways in which he or she needs it. Okay? So does that make sense? So if a person is coming and they have said, oh, I was, you know, raped last week, oftentimes people don't do anything about it. Okay, so that may mean, you know, providing them with, you know, sort of the loving support for them to take some steps, to draw some boundaries, to file file something against, you know, that person to the police. So you're empowering them to go and do something about it. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah.
I think it also helps when there's like a rape victim to not make them like feel like a victim, which is essentially empowering them in that they actually have control over their own life.
Yeah. Right. And unfortunately, I've seen it time and time again where it's not just once, you know, with, you know, somebody that may have been through a lot of abuse growing up. You know, it's as if there's this attraction then for abusers to find that person and to continue the history of abuse. It's really a sick cycle, you know, so it's our job to remind them of who they are, to work on their identity in Christ with them, to look at Ephesians chapter 1 and, you know, note that, of course, they have everything that they need spiritually, you know, to transform out of that place of being the victim. But oftentimes they don't see it, and we don't want to say that, you're the victim, you know, but as people may share their history, we may see that there's other, you know, situations that are similar to that, and that's why they may deny and not get the help that they need in light of the circumstance.
You
Yeah.
can also direct them towards advocacy services for that revolve around that.
Yep. Good. And what advocacy services are you referring to? Something here at The Rock, or?
Yeah, we have ministries at The Rock. There's stuff in California, there's stuff in San Diego.
Yeah.
There's national organizations.
Mhm.
There's anonymous helpline.
Good.
Websites.
Yep.
I mean, it's pretty easy to find that these days.
Yeah. Good. Yeah.
For pretty much any issue that comes up, we probably have a ministry or a similar ministry that we can point them. You're like, go to this website, email this person. That's all this ministry does.
Exactly. With suicide, you know, if you know somebody that has unfortunately passed away by suicide, or if you've struggled it yourself, there's different ministries for both things here. Aftershock is one. The ripple effect, you know, of suicide, you know, is of course pervasive, and you know that's led by somebody that had, you know, a family member pass away from suicide, and she kind of walks with people, and they go through a book together and provide one another